They say some moments stick with you, moments that burrow deep inside, no matter how much you try to forget. 2 years ago, I lived through one of those moments. A single knock at midnight, it wasn't just a sound. It was a crack in the quiet, a rupture in the ordinary life I thought I had. I remember sitting up in bed, my heart thudding so loud I was sure it would wake the entire house. The room was dark, the moonlight barely spilling through the curtains, casting long, strange shadows across the walls. And then, the knock again. Slow, deliberate. Hesitant, almost scared. I didn't know who it was at first. My husband was asleep, snoring softly beside me, distant as he always had been these past few years. And the kids, my younger one, deep in dreams. But that knock, it was different. There was urgency in it, a weight I couldn't place. I walked to the door, my bare feet cold against the wooden floor, every step feeling like a countdown. My hand trembled as I reached the handle. Something inside me whispered that this wasn't just a child needing comfort. Something told me, deep down, that nothing about this night would ever feel ordinary again. When I opened the door, the world shifted. Nothing about what happened after that knock was what I expected. Nothing could have prepared me for the flood of emotions, the confusion, the guilt, the shock that came crashing down like waves I couldn't fight back. What happened that night? I can't erase it from my mind. I can't pretend it didn't happen. And I can't stop thinking about how one small moment, one simple knock at midnight, changed everything I believed about love, trust, and myself. If you think you've heard the worst secrets a family can hold, just wait. Because the story I'm about to tell you isn't just about what happened, it's about how one choice, one night, can ripple through every corner of your life. And I still feel it, every single day. I never thought I'd feel this alone in my own home, but somehow, that's exactly how it felt. Every night, I'd walk through the quiet house and it felt empty. Not empty like the rooms were bare, they were full of furniture, toys, pictures, reminders of a life I was supposed to love, but empty in the way that matters most, empty of connection. My husband, he was there, technically. But emotionally? He might as well have lived in another city. Most nights, I'd catch him scrolling on his phone in the living room, barely looking up when I passed by. Sometimes, he'd mumble a good night before disappearing into our bedroom, and that was it. No touch, no conversation, no warmth. Just distance. And me? I tried. I tried to fill the silence, tried to keep everything together, tried to smile when the kids came running to me in the morning, but inside I felt invisible. Like I was nothing more than a shadow passing through the rooms I lived in. I remember standing at the kitchen sink one night, looking out the window, washing the dishes, and just thinking. Is this all there is? Just washing plates and pretending I'm okay? My son, he was different. He was curious, affectionate, full of life in ways that made my heart ache and my chest feel tight all at once. He didn't know about my loneliness, he was just a kid, but there was a way he looked at me sometimes, a softness, a need for closeness that tugged at something inside me. He'd come running to me with a hug after a bad dream or sit on the edge of my bed at night, chattering about school or friends, and I longed for that connection. Maybe too much. The house itself didn't help. The walls were quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator or the soft ticking of the clock. Family photos lined the shelves, smiling faces frozen in time, but when I looked at them, all I saw was what I'd lost, laughter that didn't reach anyone anymore, closeness that had disappeared, love that felt distant. Even the children's toys seemed like reminders of a life I was missing rather than joy. It was in that space, lonely, cold, heavy with unspoken words and unmet needs, that the tension started building. Little things, small touches, lingering looks from my son, the way he'd press close when he was tired or scared, things that normally would have felt harmless, even comforting, began to stir something dangerous inside me. I could feel it, like a quiet warning at the edge of my mind, this closeness was different. It was stirring feelings I knew I shouldn't have. But I couldn't stop myself from noticing, couldn't stop myself from craving the warmth, the attention, the connection. I kept telling myself I was just lonely, just in need of love, but the truth was, I was walking toward a line I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. And that night, when the knock came at midnight, all those lonely moments, the distance, the quiet, the craving for connection, collided in one heartbeat. It set the stage for what was about to happen, and there was no turning back. I didn't know it yet, but that knock was more than just a sound. It was the start of a storm I couldn't have imagined, and I was already standing in the middle of it, trembling. The knock came again. 3 slow raps, and my heart skipped a beat. At first, I told myself it was nothing, maybe he had a nightmare, maybe he just needed a glass of water. But the way it echoed through the quiet house, it felt heavier somehow. More urgent. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the sheets cool against my skin, and walked toward the door. Each step felt louder than the last, like the house itself was holding its breath with me. I could hear my son's soft breathing through the door, uneven and shaky. That little rhythm, that sound, it was innocent, yes, but there was something in it that pulled at me in ways I wasn't ready to admit. When I opened the door, there he was. My son, in his pajamas, hair mussed from sleep, eyes wide and searching. He looked so small, so vulnerable, that my heart clenched. I instinctively reached out to pull him into a hug, and the moment our bodies touched, I felt that warmth, the closeness, the softness, wrap around me like a blanket I hadn't known I needed. He whispered, almost too quietly for me to hear, "Mom, I had a bad dream." I knelt down to his level, brushing the hair from his forehead, and that's when I noticed it, the way his gaze lingered on me, a look that was curious, affectionate, and something else. Something I couldn't name but felt deep in the pit of my chest. And in that quiet, dimly lit hallway, with only the moonlight spilling across the floor, a thought slipped into my mind that I wasn't supposed to have. "It's okay, baby. I'm here," I murmured, hugging him a little tighter than necessary. I felt his warmth, his small body pressing against mine, and for a moment, the loneliness that had weighed on me for so long lifted, replaced by a dangerous sense of comfort. I could feel my heart racing, not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment. Every instinct told me this closeness was wrong in ways I couldn't even put into words. And yet, I didn't pull away. I couldn't. That night, my house was silent. The clock ticked like a metronome, marking each heartbeat, each second stretching into something that felt both terrifying and irresistible. I tried to focus on the fact that he was scared, that he was my child, that this was normal, but my mind betrayed me. Memories of loneliness, neglect, and unmet desire surged forward. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not by my husband, not by anyone, but by someone whose affection was pure, immediate, and unfiltered. And then he looked up at me, eyes shining, holding on to me like he never wanted to let go. That small, innocent gesture, so simple, so natural, hit me harder than anything I had felt in years. A warning bell rang in my head, but it was drowned out by the ache inside me, the craving I'd been trying to ignore for so long. I opened the door fully, inviting him into my space. I should have stopped there. I should have reminded myself of boundaries, of what was right. But in that moment, everything else, the loneliness, the longing, the years of neglect, collapsed, and I let him step closer. And as he moved toward me, smiling nervously, whispering my name, I knew, even then, that nothing would ever be the same. I opened the door, and in that moment everything changed. As soon as the door closed behind us, I felt a wave of heat and fear rush through me, like my body knew something my mind didn't want to admit. I held him in my arms, and at first, it was just comfort, just soothing him after a bad dream. But the longer I held him, the heavier the weight in my chest became, a mixture of guilt, shame, and a strange, undeniable pull I couldn't explain. I told myself, this is wrong. It has to be wrong. Every moral fiber in me screamed it. But at the same time, there was a part of me, a small, trembling part, that whispered, you've been so alone. You've been craving touch, connection, affection. And it was true. I had spent months, maybe even years, feeling invisible in my own home. My husband was there, yes, but not really. Not in the ways that mattered. Not in the ways that made me feel alive. And now, here was someone who needed me, who looked at me with trust and warmth, who clung to me without hesitation. I tried to focus on that innocence, that purity, but even as I did, my mind betrayed me. Thoughts I couldn't bear to name kept creeping in, the softness of his skin, the way he pressed close, the way his eyes lingered. I felt a rush of guilt so sharp it cut through me, and then, almost immediately, a warmth that confused me even more. How could I feel both guilt and longing at the same time? I blamed it on loneliness. I blamed it on years of neglect, of being unseen, of aching for attention that never came. I told myself, this is just human. This is just need. It's not real. It's not crossing any lines. But I knew deep down that the line was already trembling beneath my feet, ready to snap. I sat down on the edge of the bed, holding him close, and my mind drifted back to moments with my husband, the silences at dinner, the nights he fell asleep before I could even whisper a word, the way his eyes skimmed past me as though I were furniture instead of a person. I remembered nights spent staring at the ceiling, wishing for a touch, a glance, anything to remind me I was seen. And here was my son, offering everything I thought I'd lost, everything I'd been starving for, and I felt torn between gratitude and something darker, something I didn't want to admit even to myself. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears, my thoughts spinning. How did it come to this? Why am I feeling this way? Am I a bad mother for noticing these things? Every instinct told me to pull back, to step away, to protect both of us, but another voice inside me whispered, just for a moment. Just one moment of warmth. One moment of connection. You're not hurting anyone. You're just human. And then, in that quiet, dimly lit room, I realized the truth. I was walking a razor's edge. One misstep, 1 second of weakness, and everything I had known about myself, about my role as a mother, could shatter. And yet, the pull didn't ease. It only grew stronger. I wanted to tell myself it was only the dream, only the fear, only the moment. But I couldn't. My mind raced, my heart ached, and somewhere deep inside, I knew that the line between care and something forbidden was already blurring. I wasn't sure if I was scared, exhilarated, or both, but I knew one thing for certain, after tonight, nothing would ever feel safe again. And that fear, that guilt, it mingled with desire in a way that made my chest tighten and my thoughts spiral. I felt trapped between two worlds, one of love and protection, and one of dangerous, forbidden longing. And I knew, if I didn't stop myself now, I could cross a line I would never be able to come back from. The night stretched on, heavy and slow, like time itself had decided to hold its breath. I could feel his small hands in mine, gripping gently, and I knew that somewhere, deep down, this closeness was starting to awaken feelings I should have buried the moment he was born. And yet, I couldn't pull away. Every fiber of my body wanted to hold him a little longer, touch him a little closer, feel that warmth that had been missing from my life for so long. He curled up beside me on the edge of the bed, his head resting lightly against my shoulder. It should have been innocent, just a scared child seeking comfort, but the way he fit there, so naturally, so trusting, made my heart ache in ways I couldn't name. I felt the tension coil tight in my chest, the part of me that knew this was wrong, screaming, and the part of me that craved connection, whispering that it was okay, just for a moment. He shifted slightly, brushing against me, and my mind went blank for a second, caught between guilt and desire. I scolded myself silently, no, this is just comfort. Nothing else. Stop thinking. But my body betrayed me, responding to the warmth, the closeness, the small, innocent pressure of him against me. We laughed quietly at a silly story he whispered about school, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like we were just two people, sharing a bond, nothing else. But then, he reached out and touched my hand, lingering slightly longer than necessary, his small fingers brushing mine in a way that felt charged. My stomach knotted, my pulse quickened, and I realized with a sinking feeling that the line had already begun to blur. I tried to distract myself, pulling the blanket a little higher, adjusting my position to create distance, but he moved closer again, resting his head against my chest this time, sighing softly. And I I didn't move him away. I couldn't. Not entirely. Not yet. My mind screamed at me, "This is your child. This is wrong. Stop." And yet, every instinct I'd been starving for, touch, affection, connection, pulled me closer. The shadows in the room grew longer as the moonlight shifted across the floor, painting everything in soft, silver tones. I could feel the tension building, subtle but undeniable, like the quiet before a storm. Every small movement, every lingering glance, every accidental brush of skin was electric. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that it was only the quiet of the house playing tricks on me, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. And then, the moment of panic. A sudden notification on my phone lit up the room, startling both of us. He jumped slightly, eyes wide, and I caught a glimpse of that innocence again, so trusting, so unaware of the complexity of what was happening. I fumbled to silence the phone, my hands shaking, my pulse thundering in my ears. For a heartbeat, I imagined someone seeing us like this, imagined my husband waking up and realizing what had begun in his absence. The fear shot through me, sharp and terrifying. But then, after the phone went dark, the tension returned, heavier this time. He leaned against me again, and I could feel his small body relax into mine. I whispered reassurances to myself, telling myself it was just a dream, just a moment of comfort, just a lapse born of loneliness. But even as I said it, I could feel the line shifting beneath us, inch by inch, bending towards something irreversible. Every laugh, every brush of his fingers, every sigh he made, it pulled me deeper into a storm I couldn't escape. I was caught between the morality I clung to and the desire I could no longer deny. And in that dimly lit room, with shadows dancing along the walls and the quiet of the house pressing in around us, I realized, the next step, the point of no return, was closer than I dared imagine. The air in the room felt thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Every sound, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant ticking of the clock, even our breathing, echoed in my ears. My heart was pounding so loudly it felt like it could give me away, like it could announce to the whole world what was happening in that dark, quiet room. He shifted slightly, resting closer against me, and I felt a rush of warmth, electric, consuming, confusing. My mind screamed at me, "Stop. This is wrong. He's your child." But another voice, smaller but insistent, whispered, "Just one moment. Just a little closeness." And in that split second, the walls I'd built around myself began to crumble. I remember the way his small hand brushed mine again, lingering, and my chest tightened, not from cold, but from the pull I could no longer deny. There was fear, yes, fear of what I was doing, fear of what it meant, but there was something else too, something dark and dangerous, the undeniable thrill of attention, of touch, of being seen in a way I hadn't been for years. I didn't know how it could have gone that far, until it did. One accidental brush, one lingering touch, and suddenly the lines between care, affection, and desire blurred completely. I froze, heart hammering, trapped in the whirlpool of emotions swirling around me, guilt, shame, fear, and something I didn't want to name but couldn't stop feeling. He looked up at me, eyes wide, innocent, trusting, and I knew, in that heartbeat, that the dynamic between us had shifted. I could feel the weight of what I had done pressing down on me, the moral boundary I had crossed, and the impossibility of going back. My stomach twisted, my chest burned, and tears welled in my eyes, not just from guilt but from the intensity of the moment. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The room was silent except for our breathing. Every instinct in me wanted to rewind, to pull him close and reassure myself that nothing had happened, but deep down, I knew things had changed forever. There was no undoing it. The warmth, the closeness, the tension, it had already reshaped the way I felt about everything. And in that moment, I realized the terrifying truth: desire, once awakened, cannot always be silenced by logic or morality. Fear and pleasure, guilt and longing, they were all tangled together, leaving me dizzy, trembling, and completely undone. I knew I had crossed a line, one I could never uncross. And as I looked down at him, the person I loved most in the world and simultaneously shouldn't want in this way, I felt the full weight of what I'd done. My mind raced with questions I didn't want to answer. How did I let it happen? What comes next? Can we ever go back to how things were? I didn't have the answers. I only knew one thing: the world I had known, the safe, familiar life I had clung to for so long, had disappeared that night, in the quiet of a darkened room, with a single knock that started it all. And that's when I realized, there was no turning back. If you want to know what happened after this, the consequences, the fallout, and the way this secret shaped everything, don't miss what happens next. Subscribe now to Stories by T.E. The days after that night were strange. The house felt different, heavier, quieter, like the walls themselves had absorbed the tension between us. Every glance felt loaded, every brush of a hand or accidental touch carried a weight I couldn't ignore. I found myself watching him more closely than before, noticing little things I hadn't before, the way he lingered near me, the way his eyes searched mine sometimes, almost like he knew something I couldn't admit aloud. He seemed different too. There was a subtle shift in him. He was still my little boy, still innocent and playful, but there was a new boldness in the way he interacted with me, a curiosity that made my stomach twist. Sometimes he would sit closer than usual or touch my hand briefly, and I could see a flicker of something in his expression, confusion, affection, maybe even the faintest awareness that something had changed between us. I hated myself for noticing it, hated myself for feeling the way I did, but I couldn't help it. At the same time, I tried to act normal, to keep the house running the way it always had. I made breakfast, reminded him to brush his teeth, asked about school, all while my mind was spinning with guilt and fear. Every smile I gave felt forced, every laugh hollow. I was walking around like a ghost in my own home, haunted by what had happened, by the knowledge that one night had altered everything. And the silences. God, the silences were the worst. When we sat together, sometimes reading or watching a movie, there were moments where neither of us spoke, and I could feel the tension pressing in, thick and suffocating. I didn't know whether to be relieved that he wasn't saying anything, or terrified that he might. Every unspoken thought felt dangerous, every secret glance seemed like a reminder of the line I had crossed. I caught myself replaying that night over and over, in vivid detail, in the quiet hours when everyone else was asleep. The fear, the shame, the desire, it haunted me. And I could see already that this was just the beginning. That night had set something in motion that wouldn't stop with guilt or whispered apologies or even silence. Something fundamental had shifted, and I knew the consequences would reach further than I could yet imagine. Every time he smiled at me, every time he sought me out for comfort, every small, lingering touch, it was a reminder of what had happened, a reminder of the storm I'd stepped into. And I could feel myself being pulled deeper, caught between the desire to protect him, the need for affection, and the growing fear of what this had already done to both of us. I lie awake at night now, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of that night over and over. My mind is a storm I can't quiet, questions spinning, twisting, gnawing at me. What have I done? How did I let this happen? Am I a terrible mother? Every instinct screams that I crossed a line that can never be uncrossed, yet I can't stop thinking about it, can't stop feeling it. The guilt is heavy. It sits on my chest like a weight, pressing down so that sometimes it's hard to breathe. And yet, mixed with the guilt, there's longing, an ache that surprises me with how deep it runs. I tell myself it's just loneliness, just unmet needs, but sometimes, even I can't believe that excuse anymore. It feels like desire. And the shame that comes with that thought is almost unbearable. I ask myself what I should do next. Should I confess? Should I pretend it never happened? Should I act like everything is normal and bury the memory deep, where no one, not even I, can touch it? But I know the truth, hiding it won't erase it. The secret hangs between us, heavy and invisible, shaping every glance, every touch, every moment of connection that comes after. And yet, I can't help thinking about him, about the closeness, the trust, the warmth. I feel drawn to it, terrified of it, ashamed of it. Was it desire, or just desperation? I can't answer that. Maybe it's both. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. All I know is that something fundamental has changed, something that can't be undone, and I'm left alone in the quiet of my own conscience, wrestling with it. Every day, I try to be normal. I smile, I cook, I clean, I play with him, but underneath it all, there's a storm I can't calm. A storm of guilt, of longing, of confusion, of shame. And sometimes, I wonder if this is how it always will be, if I'll ever find peace, or if I'm doomed to carry this secret, this ache, this moral collapse, for the rest of my life. I know what I'm sharing tonight is difficult, maybe even shocking. And I can only imagine how you're feeling listening to this. I want to ask you, if you were in my place, faced with the kind of loneliness, the kind of complicated emotions I've been living with, what would you have done? Would you have resisted, fought it, stayed within the boundaries that we all know should never be crossed? Or would you, like me, find yourself wavering, lost in desire, in longing, in desperation? I want to hear your thoughts. Your experiences, your advice, even your judgment, it all matters to me. Please, share your perspective in the comments. I read every single one, and I want this to be a space where we can confront these truths together. And if you want to follow more stories like this, raw, emotional, impossible to forget, subscribe to Stories by TE. Don't miss the next intense, true story that dives deep into the secrets, the guilt, the tension that people live with behind closed doors. Take a moment. Think about what you would do. And then, when you're ready, leave your thoughts below. Your voice could be the one that helps someone else feel less alone in their own struggles.